Mike Hirschberg, obviously we all know as the executive director of the Vertical Flight Society and the American Helicopter Society for about 20 years. He's now basically serving as the director of strategy for the society. He used to work at Centra, a very experienced engineer there in different programs with the Joint Strike Fighter and the Office of Naval Research. He did a lot of work on the X-32 and X-35 during the propulsion analysis of early in the program for those two demonstrators. But in the biggest impact that obviously he has done for our industries at the Vertical Flight Society. So we are very honored to have him to present a paper on one of his collaborators for a very long time, Hal Andrews. So I'm going to ask him to please come here and present it. Let me go ahead and bring the slides up, Mike.
All right, well, thank you folks for coming. I'm going to talk about Hal Andrews, who was not in the same league perhaps as Heinrich Flacke, but also very influential on vertical flight and naval aviation in general. So since 2009, there's been a Vertical Flight Foundation scholarship in the name of Hal Andrews, which has been funded by me every year. And I intend to continue to fund it, hopefully in perpetuity. But I realized last summer, when there was a call for abstracts, that he hasn't been really. There wasn't really much in a comprehensive biography for him, so I decided to write this paper to fill that void. So fundamentally, Hal Andrews was a lifelong bureaucrat. Now, that has negative connotations today, but it's really just to say that he served as an important cog in the development of naval aviation for more than 30 years. He wasn't a famous inventor or aviator, but during his time at the Naval Air Systems Command, he held responsibilities for nearly 50 types of U.S. Navy, Marine, and joint aircraft. It's been said that pretty much every aircraft after the Korean War, he had some hand in, even continuing for half century, but even continuing to today. But he was really so much more than that. When I mention his name to people who knew him, their eyes light up, and they have this irresistible urge to tell me what he not only what he did for a key aircraft program, but also what he did for them and what he meant for them. I only knew him for the last decade of his life, but he forever changed the trajectory of my professional career, and I wanted to give a few insights here. But the paper is more than 10,000 words, so the details are there. I tried to document things in more detail. It's fitting that we're here at Virginia Beach this year, as this is my last forum as a VFS staff member. I'm leaving the headquarters this summer. And also the last time I published and presented a forum paper was in 2011, also at Forum 67, also here at Virginia Beach, which was like the day after my interview for being the executive director. The time before that was Forum 63 in Virginia Beach, when I was the Society's first forum deputy chair in May of 2007. I talked to Hal shortly before leaving for the forum. We talked about whether he was planning to go or not, but he didn't. He ended up not attending. I'm sure when I got back, I talked to him because I talked to him pretty much every week, sometimes several times a week. But he had a heart attack a couple weeks later and then passed away. So this forum here in Virginia Beach has a lot of meaning for me and for this talk. So here's a list of some of the designs that he was involved in. Originally as an entry-level stability and control and flight dynamics engineer, then getting into supervisory. You see that the yellow ones here are VTOL, vertical flight aircraft. So as I said, he had a hand in pretty much everything that flew in naval aviation over the last half century, and continue to today. Later in his career, in the 1970s and 80s, he was involved in a lot of things that were vertical. He had a major hand in getting the AV-8B Harrier II into service, testing the XV-15, which led to the V-22, and the X-35, which led to the F-35B. Shown here is a full-scale wind tunnel model of the McDonnell 260, which is a contender for the VTOL, called the VTOL A. So this was anti-submarine warfare, sensors, these kind of utility multi-mission roles, and that was versus the VTOL B, which was fighter and attack aircraft like the Rockwell XFV-12A, and that's a thrust augmented wing, which he referred to as a thrust argumentative wing because it never quite did what they were hoping for. So Hal grew up in Ithaca. His father was a professor at Cornell University. He started his engineering degree there, but then enlisted in the Navy in 1944. So he served for 2 years. I'll mention later, he was very involved in naval aviation news, official naval aviation publication. Referred to him later, says he was bitten by the model building bug as a 12-year-old and has been intrigued by machines that fly ever since. He knew he wanted to be an engineer early in his life, and this is, I don't know why they used and said but he interrupted his education to join the Navy in 1944. So he was a aviation radio technician, which is equivalent today to an aviation electronics technician today. And I don't know if you know, but avionics is an abbreviation. It's a combination of aviation electronics. Okay, just like pixel is a picture element. When they invent words, that's where they come from. He did, after the war, he finished his bachelor's in mechanical engineering at Cornell, graduated as a member of the Tau Beta Pi Honor Society, which I was not. He moved to Seattle, worked at Boeing as a draftsman and junior engineer on strategic bombers, you see there, including early development of the B-52 bomber. He continued in the Navy Reserve, so he continued drilling every weekend or every month, and he wanted to be an officer. There's a story where he got a call and it's okay, your unit's been activated. You have an hour to report. So then he stayed on the Seattle area. But served 2 more years on active duty, and he actually remained in the Navy Reserves several more years, so 10 years in total. After the war, he went back to Cornell. To Ithaca. He had met his wife Ellen while they were students. They had married, and she actually also came out to Seattle and worked for Boeing. So he went to work for a Cornell Aeronautical Laboratory, CAL, which was later privatized and has now became CalSpan, and it's had a series of owners over the last several decades. But he authored a number of papers on captured Soviet aircraft designs and other technical aspects. Began working on his master's degree, but he couldn't afford to continue, and he told me the story of he had lost so much weight. His wife says, "You can't keep doing this yourself." And even though he had earned some fellowships and scholarships, it was too much. So he was never able to earn his master's degree, and that was the impetus for me funding this scholarship, which every year goes to a student in the DC area that is working on their master's degree. And I encourage everybody here to consider funding a scholarship in somebody who really inspired your career, or that some way to give back to the community and the next generation. I have a number of pictures of him, like a pilot, or he was not a pilot. He had at one point he had his private pilot's license, but he was not an aviator, a naval aviator. But he said sometimes we got to sample the product. So when they were developing the contenders for the T-45, the Goshawk, he got to fly in some of the trainers and stuff like that. But anyway, he was going from Ithaca down to Pax River to check out what the Navy had there, but for a job interview. But he decided to stop in Washington D.C., downtown D.C., and talk to these folks at NavAir, which at the time was called the Bureau of Aeronautics, BUAir. and he ended up getting a job offer and working there for 31 years. So the name of I talk about this a little bit in the paper, but the name, it was Bureau of Aeronautics, and that was combined with Bureau of Ordnance, which then became Bureau of Weapons, or BUEPS. But they kept changing it. It's now the Naval Air Systems Command since 1966. So it was in Washington, D.C., downtown D.C. at the Navy Yard. Moved to Arlington in 1970, and I actually worked there in those buildings in the 1990s after he had retired. And it's been since 1996. It's been at Paxer. But yeah, over the next 31 years, has worked on essentially every naval aircraft that was fielded, and mostly experimental, or many of them experimental ones. So again, he started as a junior engineer. About 5 years later, became the assistant head of stability and control. He got into program management. He became the Navy's director of ground tests and flight development of the Bell X-22. We can see there behind him, which was mainly tested at Calsman. Can you see my mouse? This is him here. He's second from the left. Again, about every 5 years, he was promoted again, head of aerodynamics and hydrodynamics branch, and technical director of the overall Navair airframe division. Kept adding more responsibilities. He became a member of the U.S.-UK Joint Management Board for what was called the AV-16. So the U.S. bought the AV-8A from the Brits, even though some of that work was the funding was supported by the U.S. And they were looking at some sort of supersonic version or whatever. But eventually they decided to kind of step back, and it was sort of the backup to the backup to the backup of developing a supersonic VTOL aircraft, which was then became the AV-8B. So he had a key role in that. Again, here's another picture of him flying. This was the only two-seat F-8, so he got to fly supersonic or transonic in that. He then became the director of research and technology group for advanced aircraft systems. He became an SES. Then became associate technical director for research and technology, where he was responsible for the entire Navair exploratory development program. And I think I left out a slide here. Yeah, sorry about that. He ended up being the technical director for all of research and technology for the Navy, for Navair. Retired in 1986. Here's Ellen there behind the graduation certificate. So he was named, 5 years later, he was named as an honorary naval aviator. Again, he was not a Navy pilot, not a naval aviator, but throughout the last 50 years, there have been a number of people who've been designated as honorary naval aviators. So Admiral Rickover, Secretary of the Navy John Warner, Admiral Burke, General Doolittle, Paul Garber, the founder of the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum, Bob Hope, who did a lot of work supporting the troops, Ed Heinemann from Douglas. And even this year in January, it still continues, Jerry Bruckheimer and Tom Cruise from Top Gun were also named as honorary naval aviators because they had done so much for inspiring people to become naval aviators. His contributions have been recognized in numerous books. This book on the XV-15 came out in 2000. There is a description in here talking about one of the leading advocates for naval VTOL capability and a strong proponent for the tilt-rotor aircraft within Navair at the time was Hal Andrews. The timely funding provided by the Navy enabled the TRRA, the tilt-rotor research aircraft, to continue flight testing. And Tommy Thomason, a member of this committee, I mentioned I was writing this article, and he wrote me paragraph after paragraph. Again, these people who, you mentioned Hal Andrews, and they're like, oh yeah, let me tell you this. So he was critical of NASA, who really wanted to do the wind tunnel research on the XV-15, and in his opinion was not really that supportive of flight testing the aircraft. I think the first one crashed. So Hal Andrews, Navair, was able to get some small amount of funding, I don't know, a couple $100,000 or something, And the Navy signed out a note saying, hey, we want to see this aircraft, this tilt-rotor aircraft, on a ship. So that sort of said, oh, well, there's potential an operator is potentially interested in. So basically got the program back off the dime and was able to get into flight, aircraft mode, flew 300 knots. And it flew at the Paris Air Show, which was really the point where Secretary of the Navy John Lehman said, that could be, we need that. That could be really helpful. So Tommy Thomason's comment, who was an executive at Bell at the time and later became an executive at Sikorsky, said, without Hal Andrews stepping in, there would be no V-22. It would have been a science project like the XV-14 or something. I mentioned the STOL program, so he helped initiate this program in the 80s. They studied all these different VTOL configurations. They basically said the lift fan is the best design, and then the Joint Strike Fighter program, JSF, that was merged into that program by Congress, and they spent $3 billion proving that was actually correct. Right, Erasmo? Direct lift is too hard. Importantly, he mentored a new generation of engineers and researchers, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But one thing, and there's a lot of parallels with Hal Andrews' life and mine, and I don't, he was a real engineer. I've been mainly a program manager. But in 1959 or so, there's a really great story. It's really funny. I relate it, and it's in the paper. But like, Naval Aviation News is an official naval aviation publication produced by the Navy, and he'd find a typo in it and say, hey, I found this typo. This caption says it's the, I don't know, the Curtis blah 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 blah, but it's really the Curtis blah blah blah. And so like, it's like, oh, sorry about that. And so the next month, and issue comes out, hey, there's another mistake in here. Like instead of this, it should have been that. And so, oh man, we think we're really smart and we really track this Navy stuff, but this guy's right. So the third month goes by, and he calls again, like, I found another mistake. And the editor says, look, why don't you do us both a favor and come down to the office before we go into print, and then you can find the mistakes beforehand. And that's actually how I got to be involved in VFS, where I was telling, and I had no idea, but I met with VFS, like, you got some typos here, I could edit it before it goes to print and stuff like that. And, they said, oh, we need a new managing editor. You could be the managing editor of Vertiflight. So here I am. He wrote, so that was in 1959. Since 1960, he had been on the masthead for the magazine as a technical advisor. He wrote regular articles. He proofed every article. You can see here the pages are up on the thing, and there's a lot of stories here about, hey, if we could get by Hal Andrews, we knew that the magazine was going to be right. He's acknowledged in all kinds of books. Tommy Thomason dedicated his comprehensive book on naval aviation to Hal Andrews. I nominated him for the AIAA Fellows Award for a continued lifetime of dedication to the advancement of aviation, the preservation and understanding of our aeronautical heritage, and service to AIAA. I was last month recognized as an AIAA fellow as well. So this was very, meaningful for me since I was there, and that's his daughter, Betsy, with him. But it was meaningful for me, again, to kind of experience the same thing that he did. I had some notes there in blue. So he was the head of the National Capital Section of AIAA, actually of AIS, the Institute for Aeronautical Sciences, the year that the Aeronautical Sciences and the Rocket Science Society merged. So he was in charge of merging the local chapters into one AIAA chapter in the 1960s. In the 2000s, that's a typo, National Capital Section, he was also involved and got me involved in that, and I served as an officer in the executive committee on the National Capital Section. He also, I worked with him on nominating several different AIAA historic sites, including the College Park Airport. And that's what led to the VFS heritage sites of recognizing these important vertical flight locations. He was recognized by the Naval Aviation Museum for history and literature. There are so many magazines, in the last 50 years that had so many, collection of Hal Andrews, and this is also because of me, but because of this article here. In the history of AIAA, the book, it cites Dr. John Anderson, who wrote a lot of textbooks on aeronautics and astronautics. John Anderson and Hal Andrews are among those whose memories and insights were essential in shaping this volume. He did a lot of teaching. So UTSI, University of Tennessee Space Institute, he lectured on experimental flight dynamics. He helped start the fundamentals of VTOL aircraft short course, which I've taught at every year, and Rosmo and the AIAA VTOL Technical Committee are going to be teaching online starting in October. So if you're interested in VTOL, especially jet VTOL and such, sign up for that. He also taught with Professor George Matthews of AIAA this 3-week course, intensive, 40 hours a week, overview of aircraft design and development. And George Matthews was my professor and one of the other big inspirations from my getting through my engineering degree. Mentoring the next generation. This is me over here with my boss, Iris Curtis, on the right, Hal on the left. So he was a consultant to Centra Technologies, and my boss, Iris, was a young engineer at the time, and just, you see here, he had an encyclopedic knowledge of VTOL, naval aircraft, because a number of sheer programs they worked. And during the STOL program, when he was a consultant, would come up with these questions that, the airframers, right? So Boeing, McDonnell, Lockheed, and General Dynamics and Northrop, they may not have ever occurred to them. He was a great mentor too, passionate about sharing his knowledge with the next generation. I was introduced to him because I was asked by the Joint Strike Fighter Program Office, the JAS Program Office, it's like, oh, look at all these designs here on the left. This is the McDonnell VTOL wheel. I was asked to update that for the Joint Strike Fighter configuration, so I updated it 50 years later. So that's my claim to fame. Okay, that's how I got involved in all this stuff. Here's a great picture with me and Erasmo as young men with some of the giants. So that's John Schneider on the right side in the brilliant red coat there. We named the John Schneider Historical Achievement Award after him. Hal Andrews, that's Hans Nietzbala, who was at a young engineer, was working on in the 60s and early 70s on one of the German VTOL aircraft. So this is the International Powered Lift Conference. It's where I met Erasmo. We were reminiscing about that last night. So he was across the street from me. Here's DARPA building, the old DARPA building on the right. There's a little annex here. I was in the annex. Here's his apartment building. He was on the apartment 102 here on the second floor. This is the church that he and his wife Ellen volunteered at and worked at. Basically, Naval Aviation News, Captain Zip Rauza published this statement here. Hal loved airplanes, but his true love was helping people, and he seemed to help everyone. And it was really fitting, and the way that I've tried to live my life and my professional career of helping people through my service through VFS and also in the history, the aspects of history.